Surah 86. Though short, this surah consists of several portions. The first, verse 1 through 6, of which 2 and 3 are later explanatory interposition, expresses man's subjection to a law. This, verse 7 through 10, are probably later, using the preceding to point to the moral of the resurrection. Verse 11 through 14 are earlier assertions of the seriousness of the message. Verse 15 to 17 are later, but still probably Meccan, fragment dealing with plots against the prophet and counseling patience in view of punishment to come. These two pieces perhaps owe their presence to their having stood on the back of 7 through 10. Well, yeah, that silliness of there weren't scraps and they were trying to arrange them together. And, he's coming up with an editing process like Muhammad wandered around with a pile of papers and whatnot. And why do no one who didn't believe him was recording this? You could say, well, what about the people who believed him trying to keep it secret? It's like, well, but no one who was opposed to him passed on any of this. But so Surat Tariq, chapter of the meteor. Well, meteor translates a traveler, but coming by night must have been an unusual one in this connection, variously explained as the evening star or the morning star. The explanation in verses 2 and 3 probably takes it as a shooting star. Surah 37, verse 10. This is probably associated with the angel watchers of heaven, suits verse 4. Over every soul, assuredly, a watcher, said here to refer to Allah, but nowhere else is used, and the idea is rather that of the angel watchers over man's deeds. And of course, then we refer to He as, Allah has the final power to bring back. But verse 11 starts to talk about the seriousness of the message. It's like, what, all that stuff about the secretness and all this, that's serious too, right? 11 through 14, splits, as in sprouting the seeds, the certainty of the returning seasons and different related things, right? Allah has the final stratagem, the plots and counterplots, 15 through 17. Surah 87. The surah begins with a passage 1 through 6, 8, 9, encouraging the prophet to proceed with the recitation of the Qur'an and promising him divine help in doing so. This must belong to an early beginning of the public delivery of the Qur'an. To this has been added somewhat later, 10 through 15, which commend those who accept the warning, a prophecy, eternal punishment to those who turn aside from it. A second revision, probably early in Medina, but probably prior to the complete break with the Jews, introduced in verse 7, and added to the concluding, with the concluding verses of 16 through 19. Surat Al-A'la, the chapter of the Most High, encouragement to deliver the Quran, 1 through 8. So there was always doubt that something might be forgotten, because obviously if Muhammad had encountered the Quran in a vision and didn't remember the whole thing, he would maybe ever thought to himself, what if I don't remember this? It's like, don't worry. We're going to make sure you remember enough to convey it as you're supposed to convey it, right? God knowing the public and the hidden, well, what you know and what you don't know. But people have public and private deeds and public and private sides. Even when they're public, there's a private side to what they're doing. Therein they shall neither live nor die, So the afterlife is not really a death, not really a life. It's something else. For you never have the sort of control you had in life if you have a bad afterlife. But anyways, the acceptance and neglect of the warning, 10 through 15. Life not to be preferred to the future one, 16 through 19. So people purify themselves by giving alms, and you can give alms on every bone of your finger. It's not just handing over money or something. The ancient pages, the written revelation, no explanation has been given of the pages of Abraham in verse 19. Probably Muhammad assumed as Abraham was a prophet, a written revelation must have been given him. While the term's broader than that, whether the prophet who says it is that or not, but there certainly were scriptures before the Israelites were historic people attributed to Abraham. But that's ancient Egyptian stuff, and people are like, oh, ancient Egyptian, that's not. Surah 89, the surah shows much variation in rhyme and several interruptions in sense, as the rhyme shows verse 1 through 5, 8 through 12 originally went together, describing the contrasted fates of the evil and the good at the day of judgment. But the former passage, 7, 6, and 7 have been added later, and to that latter, 13 through 16 in different rhymes, verse 17 to 20 call for attention to the power of law and nature. They have a rhyme of their own and have no apparent connection with the context. They are a scrap on the back of which 13 through 16 have been written. Verse 21 and 22 urge the prophet to warn, and though not agreeing in rhyme, probably went with 1 to 5 and 8 through 12. Verse 23, 24 make an exception for the statement in 22, but the connection is loose both in grammar and sense. 25, 26 might possibly be in connection with 23, 24, but not well. They perhaps stood originally at the end of 99 and probably owe their presence here to the later sense of these verses to the preceding ones. Surat al-Ghashiyah, the chapter of the enveloping, I guess there's an H at the end, Ghashiyah, the fate of evil and the good contrasted Meccan with early 1 through 12, babbler, they hear no babbling. Yeah, this wasteful speech, yeah, I understand that too. That kind of, I'd be patient, but yeah. Allah's power and nature, 13 through 20, 13 through 16 are thought to be later than the other, but the camels, sometimes meaning clouds. Well, there's different words for camels and some other important things. They're given more words than you would expect. An overseer, the derivation of the word not quite certain, but the warner conveys. The overseer maybe controls whether or not you're carrying it out or not. So whether you believe or not, that is all on you. Surah 89, the series of observations at the beginning is not very intelligible or well arranged to this, in the Christian sense of arranging a book, but there's scripture anyways, and does not lead up to any important statement. Almost looks like it's holding up to a ridicule of some parody of Muhammad's style. Verse 5 through 13, a separate piece with a well-defined rhyme of its own. It cites for the prophet's encouragement instances of Allah's intervention of Surah 105. The rest of its surah is not so rhymey as to be, that is not unusual in earlier passages in 23, 24, belongs distinctly to the Qur'an period. It's all Qur'an period, the 23 years, but the sense is also uneven. Verse 24, 25a, there's no ABC or any of that. The same very much later also do 18 to 21. Perhaps the passage consisted originally of verse 14 through 17, pictures man's absorption in the worldly prosperity, followed by a judgment scene, verse 22, 23, 25b, 26, other verses being later at a date which can't be determined, possibly 24, 25a, 27 to 30, also meant to form each one verse and to rhyme with each other. How the various parts of the surah came to be conjoined, it is impossible to say. So therefore, if it's impossible to describe the Quran as edited in this way. Surat al-Fajr, chapter of the dawn, an oath, 1 through 13, man's response to good and evil fortune, Meccan, 14 through 21, judgment scene, 22 to 25, and I guess clear through 30. The subject of the Lord that binds or unbind, is read in the passive, talking man is the subject. And, okay, the 10 nights, actually the last 10 nights of Ramadan, the even and the odd are very important. And we're kind of wondering, you don't always know ahead of time whether the 20th is going to be one of those 10 nights. And you don't know whether the 30th is going to be one of those nights. But it is the last 10 nights of Ramadan, or the best 10 nights. And that's saging the first 10 days of the 12th month. So the pilgrimage is in the beginning of Dhul Hijjah. And the even and the odd, yeah, the night of power, now it's quite intelligible. But yeah, the night of power can be any of those 10. How your Lord dealt with odd, Iram with the pillars. Okay. In the sense reading Aram and the apposition to odd, others read it as genitive after it. Some take the name of the tribe and identify it with the biblical Aram. Others name the town Damascus, or more commonly a vanished city. Tent poles, the stakes of Pharaoh, because he had so many, are maybe buildings left behind. Surah 26, 128. The urging to feed people aren't feeding the orphan, they're not feeding the destitute. So the analogy just, the boundary stones after the talk of that. Horowitz takes the word as Ethiopic, meaning flood. And, they're not urging your, from life, and they're urging each other, are they not? And during my life, for my life. And so the subject is the Lord. And Surah 90. This surah begins with a fairly early passage, verse 1, 3, 4, 5, asserting the creation of man by Allah. This with probably Medina 2, 6, 7, verse 8 through 11, continue the same subject and may be of the same date as the beginning. To this has been added an explanation of the word Aqaba, verse 12 through 16, which probably does not correspond to the sense in which the word was used and must therefore be later. The verses may have been written on the back of 17 through 20, which are a scrap from some other context. Now, while he's not teaching vocabulary, he's giving a context. What is the context of this and that? Surat al-Balad, chapter of the land. So 1 through 16, with the explanation of the steep Medinan 12 through 16. And so verse 1, talking about the land, probably in Mecca, thou art a freedman in Medina. To attack. No, the point was not to just start wars or some stuff. People have wasted wealth. They put their wealth to troublesome means. There's two paths. The dual may be to rhyme or whatever, but haven't attempted the steep mountain path. Aqaba, here used figuratively for the path of duty. Verse 12 through 6 defines this and gives examples. And I think I have to